popular success of the Netflix series Stranger Things is predicated on a powerful contradiction. The comforting nostalgia of 1980s suburban life, shattered by a terrifying, secretive government conspiracy. From the pulsing synth soundtrack reminiscent of John Carpenter scores like The Thing and The Fog, to the classic cinematic references to Steven Spielberg's Amblin films, the show is steeped in recognizable Americana. However, the true terror of Hawkins lies in the fact that its supernatural element was intentionally grounded in real-life science in some way. The creators, the Duffer Brothers, sought inspiration in the bizarre experiments we had read about taking place in the Cold War. The fictional Hawkins National Laboratory serves as a nexus for military secrecy, unethical experiments, and interdimensional travel. The show asks the audience to believe in a government facility that routinely kidnaps children, uses mind-altering substances, and accidentally rips open a portal to another dimension. For the narrative to succeed, this fantastic horror needed a basis in documented paranoia. The creative team found this foundation in a collection of high-stakes, historical government projects and one specific, decades-old conspiracy theory that provided the perfect, terrifying blueprint. The series is therefore not just a tribute to the 1980s. It is a dramatization of Cold War fears, that the government had already sacrificed ethics for scientific ambition. The initial concept for the series was so intrinsically linked to a single conspiracy theory that the show was nearly named after its physical setting. The Duffer Brothers originally planned to call the series Montauk and set the entire narrative on the easternmost tip of Long Island, New York. This coastal location was intended to juxtapose quaint, resort town aesthetics, drawing inspiration from places like Amity and Jaws, with the oppressive, massive military base that overshadowed it. This decision to base the show on the Montauk Project instantly connects the fictional laboratory of Hawkins to Camp Hero, or Montauk Air Force Station. The relocation of the setting to fictional Hawkins, Indiana, provided the creative freedom necessary to expand the scope beyond the strict constraints of the Montauk legend. Despite the move, the core thematic elements were retained: secret government experimentation, the manipulation of children, and the collision of innocence with scientific ambition. The Montauk Project thus remains the undisputed architectural foundation for the show's setting, providing the necessary mythology for a secret lab hiding deep beneath a decommissioned military installation. The Montauk Project is not a documented government initiative, but rather an extensive, elaborate conspiracy theory that has circulated since the early 1980s. It posits that a series of secret U.S. government projects took place at Camp Hero, a former Air Force station on Long Island, focused on developing psychological warfare techniques and exotic research. The source material for this conspiracy largely stems from a series of books, beginning with the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, that came in 1992, authored by Preston Nichols and Peter Moon. Nichols claimed to have recovered repressed memories of his own involvement, asserting he was periodically abducted to continue his participation against his will. The authors of the Montauk texts were aware of the sensational nature of their claims, encouraging readers to approach the content with a sense of ambiguity and describing much of it as soft facts. This deliberate self-classification as potentially fictional or true allowed the narrative to thrive, providing fertile ground for dramatization. The three core allegations of the Montauk Project directly parallel the most bizarre plot points of Stranger Things. First is child abduction and manipulation. Believers claim that the facility contained underground labs where children were kidnapped and subjected to experiments designed to turn them into mind-controlled soldiers. Second is psychic amplification. The theories allege research involved a highly advanced chair that used electromagnets to amplify psychic energy and a psychic association trick called the seeing eye. This sophisticated system for maximizing psychic power is clearly mirrored in the technology used to harness Eleven's abilities, including her use of a sensory deprivation tank for remote viewing. Third is around dimensional and temporal research. The alleged activities centered on concepts such as time travel, teleportation, mind control, and even contact with extraterrestrial life. This fantastical element directly provides the source material for the Upside Down and the gate that breaches dimensions. The choice of Montauk provided the Duffer Brothers with a complete mythological package. By selecting Camp Hero, they rooted their story not just in a conspiracy, but in a specific location already recognized by paranoids as America's own Area 51, a physical, tangible site of deep government secrecy. To lend historical gravitas to the outlandish claims, the Montauk Project conspiracy ties itself to an earlier, equally famous military legend, the Philadelphia Experiment of 1943. The Montauk narrative claims to be the sequel, where research on making naval vessels invisible eventually led to accidental teleportation and temporal displacement. The linkage was popularized by Al Bielek, who, upon viewing a B-movie about the Philadelphia Experiment in 1988, claimed to have unlocked repressed memories of his involvement in both the 1943 event and the Montauk Project that followed. Furthermore, proponents of the Montauk theory sometimes conflate the alleged Project Rainbow with the actual 1950s CIA research initiative called Rainbow, which was genuinely focused on stealth technology to reduce the radar signature of the U-2 spy plane. By exploiting this convenient name overlap, the conspiracy narrative blends factual government naming conventions with fantastical claims of space-time manipulation, amplifying the story's perceived plausibility. This recursive quality, where new, escalating claims are built upon previous, already popularized fears, is what gave the Duffer Brothers a dense, interconnected lore ready for cinematic adaptation. While the Montauk Project provided the narrative structure for the supernatural elements of Stranger Things, the show's underlying horror, the casual cruelty of the scientists and the ethical transgression, is ripped directly from documented U.S. government history. The Duffer Brothers explicitly stated that they wanted their horror to stem from real-life science, leading viewers to the history of the Central Intelligence Agency's darkest Cold War initiatives. The real moral compass of Hawkins National Laboratory aligns precisely with Project MKULTRA, a covert CIA program that operated from 1953 to 1972. This initiative was driven by the CIA's paralyzed anxiety over the Cold War, fueled by the greatly exaggerated fear that communist nations had achieved mind control capabilities. This intense geopolitical competition provided the necessary motivation, where the government believed the ends, achieving psychological superiority, justified any means. MKUltra was a massive undertaking, comprising 149 subprojects carried out across 86 different universities and institutions. The objective was exhaustive: to find effective methods of influencing and controlling the mind and enhancing the ability to extract information from resistant subjects during interrogation. This goal included the sinister historical aspiration of creating a sleeper agent who could be involuntarily triggered to perform acts such as assassination, a goal pursued in precursor projects like Artichoke. Crucially, the operation involved systemic ethical breaches. The program administered substances and methods to both unwitting U.S. citizens and prisoners overseas, who were considered expendable. This direct violation of ethical codes, including the Nuremberg Code, the Hippocratic Oath, and the U.S. Constitution, established the true history of shadowy experimentation that lends Hawkins Lab its dark credibility. MKUltra researchers investigated a broad spectrum of psychoactive drugs, notably testing LSD, which had been isolated in 1938. They also utilized heroin, morphine, mescaline, scopolamine, psilocybin, and various truth serums like sodium pentothal. Experiments often combined methods, such as the intravenous administration of a barbiturate, followed immediately by an amphetamine once the subject was drifting into sleep. In some horrifying instances, heroin addicts were coerced into participating in LSD experiments solely for the reward of more heroin. Beyond chemistry, MKUltra studied methods to destroy and control the mind through physical and psychological distress. Subjects were subjected to extremes of temperature, electroshock, and sensory isolation. This historical practice of using sensory deprivation provides the chilling factual basis for 11's Tank sessions, demonstrating that the show's most invasive experimental scenes are based on real-world torture techniques. Furthermore, hypnosis was extensively studied in combination with drugs to create hypnotically induced anxieties and induce anterograde and retrograde amnesia in subjects. This real history of behavioral modification, forced amnesia, and drug-induced trauma is the documented source for Dr. Brenner's manipulation of his young subjects. The most fantastic aspect of Eleven's abilities, her capacity for remote viewing and sensing distant threats, is substantiated by another authentic U.S. government initiative, Project Stargate. Beginning in the 1970s, the U.S. intelligence community was preoccupied with the possibility of a psychic gap, stemming from reports that the Soviet Union was investing heavily in psychic research. Fearing that the enemy might weaponize paranormal abilities, the CIA and Department of Defense launched several projects, eventually consolidated under the name Stargate in the 1990s. The project's central focus was remote viewing, the attempt to describe or sketch details about distant locations, objects, or people without physical presence. This method, which employed handlers providing targets such as geographic coordinates, is a precise operational description of how 11 is often tasked to use her powers. Although Stargate was eventually declassified and terminated in 1995 after reviewers determined that it had not provided reliably actionable intelligence, its two-decade run confirms the government's genuine interest in weaponizing extrasensory perception, providing a crucial layer of historical plausibility for 11's highly specific type of power. The enduring power of these Cold War narratives lies in the successful execution of a historical cover-up, which feeds the very paranoia that sustains shows like Stranger Things. In January 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of the bulk of the MKULTRA records. This deliberate act of destroying evidence ensured that the full scope of the ethical violations, the testing on unwitting citizens, remained obscured from public and congressional inquiry. While congressional committees faced persistent difficulty in uncovering the truth, fragmented files totaling 700 pages were discovered in 1977, confirming the existence of the program and revealing a far more extensive series of experiments than previously acknowledged. This verified governmental deception is the essential ingredient that makes the Montauk conspiracy, and by extension, Stranger Things, work. The historical destruction of evidence guaranteed that the American public could not fully trust the official narrative of what occurred in abandoned military bases like Camp Hero. This void of information provided the perfect space for conspiracy theories alleging dimensional portals, monster summoning, and time travel to flourish, lending them a frightening, plausible resilience against fact-checking. The narrative success of Hawkins National Laboratory rests upon its fictional mission, which is the exact confluence of the historical projects analyzed. It serves as a narrative culmination of the Cold War's darkest impulses. The table on the screen synthesizes how the specific components of the fictional Hawkins facility map onto documented history and high-stakes conspiracy. The consistent threat of the Soviet Union throughout Stranger Things further mirrors the original historical motivation for these projects. The intelligence community's genuine fear of a Soviet-achieved holy grail of mind control was the impetus for the CIA's most severe ethical transgressions. By maintaining this Cold War tension, the series grounds its fictional evil in the very real geopolitical anxiety that drove MKUltra and Stargate, reinforcing the narrative that the government was willing to violate its own legal and moral boundaries. The creative brilliance of Stranger Things lies in its ability to select and synthesize disparate real-world government experiments and fictional conspiracy theories into a single, cohesive narrative. By grounding its supernatural horrors in this well-documented web of official research and elaborate, unverified claims, the Duffer Brothers achieved a sense of eerie plausibility. The show is a powerful cultural artifact because it taps into the enduring suspicion that the government operates beyond accountability. The destruction of the MKUltra records in 1973 created an unfillable vacuum of knowledge, ensuring that the public distrust, the foundation of all sophisticated conspiracy theories, would remain firmly entrenched. Ultimately, the terror of Stranger Things is a synthesized horror. The fantastical threat of the Demogorgon is manageable through friendship and courage, but the systemic, cold evil of the Hawkins National Laboratory, built on the historical precedents of documented human rights violations, is far more insidious. The series serves as a powerful fictional reminder of the paranoia inherited from the Cold War, affirming the core sentiment that gives these stories their power. The chilling possibility that when it comes to secret government projects, the truth is often stranger and darker than fiction.